Tyler Hero had an all-star season, one of his best, if not best, with the Miami Heat. Bam Adebayo did not have what we all expected him to have in terms of production this season, meaning the Miami Heat may have just started their offseason in March. My name is Manuel Buroz, and I'm going to talk about exactly what I mean by the Miami Heat season may already be over and their offseason may have already started in the middle of March, towards the end of it, with the madness has begun for the NCAA tournament. But before we talk about that, first thing I want to say is give you guys your flowers and let you guys know that we appreciate everything that you guys do in terms of supporting the channel, in terms of supporting the community, the ever-growing community. We just ask you guys continue to do what you've been doing. Continue to hit that subscribe button. Continue to show just how much you guys love the content we put out. We try to do it to the best of our abilities, and we just try to make sure that you guys know what's going on with the Heat, both the good and the bad, which we know has had plenty of this season. But I just want to say thank you so much, and please continue to do that. Continue to hit that subscribe button. Now, we're going to talk about the beginning of what some people never thought they would see. The Miami Heat may actually be in tank mode going into the offseason. It may actually be happening. Since January 1st, that is the beginning of the 2025 calendar year, the Heat were 5th in the Eastern Conference. They are now at 10th. It is March 20th now. In about just over 2 months, give or take, the Miami Heat fell 5 positions. And to be honest, there's one reason that they are not further back, and that's because the teams behind them are even worse than they have been. In that time, the Miami Heat are 26th in offensive rating, 15th in defensive rating, and are being outscored by almost 5 points every 100 possessions. That's 22nd worst in the association. Side note, the fourth quarter has been specifically the kryptonite, the Achilles heel of the Miami Heat. They just can't seem to close games out, even if they have a lead, even if they're making a comeback, even if it's a close game, they just can't do it. The fourth quarter has been the biggest thing for the Miami Heat. And the reason I bring this up is because we talk about tanking being a purposely done thing. I don't think the Heat have a choice. You just keep playing the game and let the chips fall where they may, let the ball bounce where it goes. The basketball gods clearly have proven, and I'm going to preface before I continue this video, I don't think this Heat team is this bad. I really don't. But I think the Jimmy Butler thing dragged on for so long. You finally make the trade, but now you're trying to integrate an Andrew Wiggins, a Davion Mitchell, so many pieces into an already, I'm not going to say broken team, but an already just drained team. I think it's hard to do. I don't think this team is a contender or anything like that. Like, I don't think if everything went right in this trade, we'd be up there with the Cavs and the Celtics and the Knicks and no. But I do think we'd be at least a playoff team that we're excited of seeing in the playoffs. Not a playoff team that we're like, why are we still here? We don't belong here. Because I'm being honest, we don't belong in the postseason. If we do make it somehow, we'll be a first-round exit, maybe a gentleman's sweep, but that's about it. I don't think this Heat team is that bad. I just think they were dealt a bad season, and that happens. But we still have to look forward and see what can become out of this season. So that is my quick take on what I think this Heat team is. But in the end, the Heat are still bad. The Heat are bad enough to where tanking isn't is that they're doing it on purpose or not. It's something that just might happen on its own, which I think is the way the basketball gods intended. You play your hardest, you play what you think is best, and you let the chips fall where they may. If you lose the games, you lose the games. It is what it is, but you don't do it on purpose. I don't think the Heat are going to do that. I've been watching Heat basketball. I started watching Heat basketball in 2011, 2010, when the Heat Big Three were formed. Even though that's when I joined, I went back and I studied my history. I studied the Dwayne Wade championship run, the Shaquille O'Neal trade that helped that championship run, the Dwayne Wade MVP season, the Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning, all those guys that came before the Big Three were formed, the Pat Riley era of coaching, the Stan Van Gundy, all that stuff. I understood my history of Heat basketball. But I say that to understand or to let you guys understand that I know the Heat don't do this. This is the first time that's ever happened in my time, and I would think to say in Heat culture, in Heat history, that they're probably going to be tanking or looking for a better draft pick. But even still, I don't know if that's really in the Heat's best interest. I'll talk about that in a second here. In the end, though, even though the Heat have been that bad in the 2 months or so, over 2 months now, there's a world where they still make the play-in tournament. they're still a lock because, like I said, the teams behind them, the Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards, they're even worse than the Heat are. They've been worse longer than the Heat have been. So I don't think the Heat are going to fall out of the play-in tournament. They're almost, as you can see, a play-in lock. It's just a matter of do they make it out of the play-in. And I kind of will segue that into the next part of this episode where we talk about the rules of the draft capital that we have going into the 2025 offseason and going into the draft itself. Now, before I go into it, I'm going to talk about what we have in a totality standpoint, right? As of right now, we have one pick, our pick. We do have our pick. It is lottery protected, meaning 1 through 14. In other words, if the Heat make the postseason, that pick will no longer belong to us. It conveys to the Thunder, and I'll deep dive that in a minute here. If we miss the plan, if we miss the postseason, then we do get that pick in the lottery because obviously the Thunder are going to make the postseason. The play-in tournament is not the postseason. You do not get credited for making the postseason if you make the play-in tournament and do not get out of it. So the 4 teams from each conference that make the play-in tournament, the 10, 9, 8, and 7, those teams are not in the postseason until they get out of the play-in tournament. If we make the play-in tournament and lose, we technically did not make the postseason, therefore we keep the pick. If we make the play-in tournament and win and make it as an 8 or 7 seed, or as an 8 seed probably, then we would not get the pick. Now, I say that before I talk about exactly that pick specifically here. The reason that the Heat should not, because there is a world where not keeping this pick is a good thing. This is why. Like I mentioned, the pick would be top 14 protected to the Thunder. If it is not conveyed this year, the Thunder would get our next year pick unprotected, meaning that if we are even worse next year and we get the number 1 overall pick, we do not keep it. It goes to the Thunder, no questions asked, right? That is part of the understanding the rules that we got to understand when we start talking about, do we want to do this, do we not want to do this, do we want the Heat to tank, do we want them to keep their pick, do we not want them to keep their pick? So understand, if the Heat do not make the postseason and give up their pick this season to the Thunder, we will lose our pick next year, no questions asked. Now, this would kind of start a chain reaction because, as it says there, while the Miami Heat would keep its pick by missing the playoffs this year, that would result in next year's pick being unprotected, and it would also kick a top 14 protected pick to the Charlotte Hornets in 2027 to unprotected in 2028. Meaning, if the Heat would make the playoffs, or miss the playoffs, and keep their pick this year, not only do they give the Thunder their pick next year unprotected, they would then give a 2028 pick to the Charlotte Hornets that is unprotected. So it's 2025 right now. That means that, not counting this year, 2026, 2027, and 2028. Out of those 3 years, if we were to make the lottery this year as a team, we would miss 2 out of the next 3 drafts by our own picks. They would not be our picks anymore. They would be the Hornets and the Thunders. So that's kind of the things to understand here when we're talking about, I want them to make I don't want them to make the postseason this year because I want to keep the picks. I want to draft. I like this draft class. Well, if you do that, you are basically keeping 1, but giving away 2 in the future that you don't know. Yeah, they could not be valuable, but they could also be valuable. So we got to understand all these things before we start talking about, we want them to tank. We don't want them to tank. Now, the other thing we got to talk about here, the Warriors pick from the Jimmy Butler trade, right? As of right now, the Heat have 1 draft pick. That is our pick. Like I mentioned, top 14 protected. That would go to the Thunder if it is not in the lottery. As for the Warriors pick, which is right, let me find it real quick for you guys. Here, the Warriors gave the Heat a 2025 top 10 protected pick. If not conveyed this season, the pick will be a top 10 protected first in 2026, which will turn into a 2027 if unprotected if it falls out of the 2026, if it doesn't convey either. Meaning, if the Warriors get a top 10 pick this year, they keep it. 11 through 30 becomes us. If the Warriors keep their pick this year, we would get a chance at the 2027 that is unprotected. Because in 2026, there would also be a protection on that pick. re-say that because I feel like I may have confused some people there. In this draft class, we have the Warriors pick that is top 10 protected. If that pick stays with Golden State, it says right there, if not conveyed, the pick will be a top 10 protected pick in 2026. Same thing. If it doesn't convey in that draft, then we get a 2027 unprotected first round pick. Meaning that, yes, like I mentioned before, we're losing possibly 2 of our draft picks in the next 3 years if we keep our 1 this year. But if the Warriors keep their 1 in the next 2 draft classes, we would get 1 in 2027. So there's a chance. Granted, I don't think that's going to happen because the Warriors presume to be good this year. Forget 2026. They look to be good this year. They're going to make the playoff. They're going to make the postseason. So that pick is not going to be top 10. It'll probably be early teens, best case. So we should be getting 1 that wouldn't be ours. It'd be the Warriors. And then our own that's up in the air depending on how the team does in the play-in tournament and what we can do going out of that, right? So those are the things to understand. You see right there at the bottom, kind of summarizing what I just said. With a Golden State top 10 protected pick, meaning it's the Heat if it's anywhere from 11 to 30, the 2025 draft has suddenly become far more important and realistic to get into. So the Heat basically have an insurance policy. Best case scenario, and this is depending on who you talk to, but I would say best case scenario, talking about the short term and in this draft class, the Heat could have 2 draft picks, our own and the Warriors. Realistically, you're probably going to get one of those, meaning the Warriors one. I think the Warriors one is a lock. I think we're going to have the Warriors pick. It'll be a late, like I said, late teens pick, maybe even a 20s pick, really late. So I think that's the safe pick. The 2025, the Heat's 2025 one, that's the one that's up in the air and that we need to understand what's going to happen here, right? A few other things I do want to talk about is the schedule. This picture was taken before the Pistons game that the Heat obviously did lose. So understand that. There are 14 games left in the regular season. I'm counting the Pistons game. That's why I said 14. I personally believe the Heat are going to go 500. I do. I think the team that you lose to, I already lost to the Pistons, so that's 0-1. I think you lose to the Rockets, that's 0-2. You lose to the Warriors, 0-3. You lose to the Celtics, that's 5. You lose to the Grizzlies, that's 6. You lose to the Bucks, that's 7. Now, the only team that I'm confident that we can beat, the Charlotte Hornets, the Atlanta Hawks, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Washington Wizards, the Sixers again, and the Wizards again. So you're up to 6 at that point. The Bulls is the one that I'm up in the air in. The Pelicans I'm up in the air in as well. So that's why I'm like 500 ball is what I'm comfortable with. We could be 2 games over. We could be 2 games under. But I think we'll be around 500 throughout the season, which doesn't really change much, which is why I say we're going to be a play-in tournament. Unless we go on an absolutely stellar run, I don't see us climbing out of that hole. And even if we do, that's best case 8 seed. So the Heat are going to be in the play-in tournament. Even if we lose these games, I don't even think we're going to fall out of it because I think the teams behind us, like I said, are just that bad. Now, moving on to, we'll talk about this one. Before we talk about the draft players that I have been looking at, that I have been researching on real quick through the experts and all that kind of stuff, through draft and mock drafts and everything like that, let's talk about the team. Real quick, going into next season, the players that are on contract are Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins, Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, Kyle Anderson. I believe that he will re-sign Davion Mitchell, so nobody worry about that. Haywood Highsmith, Khalil Ware, Kevin Love, Jaime Jaquez Jr. will get picked up on his team option. So will, I believe, Nikola Jovic, and then you have Pierre Larson at the bottom there. Not a lot of movement contract-wise, especially with those 4 at the top making 19, almost 20 million plus each. What you see here is that the Heat don't have a number 1 option. They don't have a number 1 option. They just don't. Let's be realistic here. Maybe 1B's best case scenario, but you don't have 1A's. You don't have Batmans. You have maybe some Robins, but you don't have Batman. Again, I say, I truly believe this team is not this bad. They are just being dealt a bad hand. So understand that before we completely write them off. I think we can write them off this season. I think that's a fair assumption to make. But moving forward, I think you give them a whole summer with each other. You give them a whole summer with Coach Spo in the Heat training camp and Heat culture. I think we can be a little better next year. I'm not saying we're going to be much better, but at least we'll be a team that we're excited to see in the postseason as opposed to a team that we maybe don't even want to see in the postseason at all because we want to see our draft pick stay with us. So let's just kind of understand that, and I just want to preface that before we continue. So did this to show you guys like kind of what we have. Again, post forward wise, we have Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware, We have Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson a little bit, which I think is probably more of a trade piece in my opinion. Nikola Jovic at the bottom there. And then guard-wise, we also have Kevin Love guard-wise, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Davion Mitchell, Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier, and Tyler Hero. Haywood Highsmith I throw in there as well. So we kind of got a little bit of everything. I think that's why I say I think the Heat don't have an identity right now. I do think that they are looking for something, and they could find it in this draft class, because in my research, I did find a couple guys that I'm very excited to talk about with you guys real quick. So what we'll talk about here now are who we're looking at. The players we're looking at, the players that we could be looking to draft, and we're going to start with a player out of Illinois. Now, this would be around the late first round. I believe actually the teens. This is a player that I saw in one of the mock drafts was around the teens, so just outside the lottery or at the edge of the lottery. This was with the Heat pick, so this would mean with us being in not making the postseason and keeping our pick this year. This is Kasparas Yakinovis. I hope I said that right. Probably didn't, but he's from Illinois. Now, the pro comp that he got was, as you can see, Chauncey Billups. I couldn't fit his whole name, so I went Chauncey Billups. 6'6" guard. He has point guard abilities. He's very creative. He's very good off the ball as well. His late game execution is what a lot of scouts have really been raving about. His passing IQ, his shot making, all that stuff. Basically, think Dalton Connect, but more of a one. That's kind of what I've been feeling when I've been reading his scouting report breakdown. The reason I say Dalton Connect is because the athleticism is the question mark. The explosiveness, the quickness, that is the question. But even still, as you can see, they have him as a top 10 pick. They have him as a top 10 pick. They have him as a player that will not fall out of the top 10, maybe 11, 12 lowest. I remember also reading in the draft report for him that because of players like Dalton Connect, like, I'm not saying he's this, but like a Luka Doncic, like a Nikola Jovic, sometimes no athleticism is not a bad thing if you fit the right pieces around him. Granted, I'm not saying that Kasparas is going to be the next of those two, but what I mean by that is understand that while he might not be the most athletic player, he still has the IQ to be able to play at the next level and could be a very, very good player for the Miami Heat. I could see him sliding into a lead forward role where he could be a 3, maybe a 2 that can handle the ball, start the offense, maybe even a 1, like a big 1, like a big guard 1 next to Tyler Hero. Maybe even if you want to start Davion Mitchell and Tyler Hero and Kasparas, that'd be a great pick. I think he gives you a lot of versatility, so I do like this pick for the Miami Heat if we were to go that route. Now, the next player that I had is a little bit different. Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph. Now, I don't have a player count from him from his draft report, but I do like what I was reading. He's basically a athletic freak with a 6'9 plus, standing at 6'9 plus, or almost, maybe more like 6'10, with a 7'4 wingspan. That is a very, very nice physical attribute to have. Averaging 15 points per game, 9 rebounds, also double-double, also with 1.4 steals, 1.6 blocks. He's a junior, but will actually be a 20 on draft night. So he's a young junior. He's going to have a lot of years left to try and develop. The question for him is feel, which I think a lot of the athletes have. I'm pretty sure Khalil Ware even had that question coming out of his college career. What I mean by that is, what people mean by that when they say feel for the game, just kind of understanding, good shots, bad shots, when I should cut, when I should not, when I should go for blocks, stuff like that. Just understanding like stuff that you can only feel and understand while playing the game. So that's what they mean by feel for the game. There's two sides. There's either the scouts that believe he's a 4 or a small ball 5, or he's a 4 with 3 upside. That I'm not safe to say on. The only reason that people are saying that is because, as you can see there, he's shooting 40% from the 3-point line on 5 attempts per game, which is really good. Don't get me wrong, that is good. But I don't think that's realistic at the next level. He is a floor spacer. He can knock down the jumper, but if you're having him shoot 5 attempts a game as a 3 just because of his defensive abilities and his college shooting, I don't think it's going to necessarily be good for you. I would prefer 4, small ball 5 side of things. That's where I lean to. Out of the two, if you were to give me a pick, if I was to pick for the Heat and you had these two players up on the draft board, because you just drafted Khalil Ware, I would probably lean Kasparas, but I wouldn't be against Rasheer just because even though you have Khalil, And bam, after that, you don't have a backup if you're starting both of them. Because right now, your backup is Kevin Love, I believe. And I don't think that's going to work, obviously. So there is a world where I do think Rasheer can be ahead of Kasparas. Not necessarily skill set, just because of, again, need for the Miami Heat at that time. This is another pick that would be around the teens, maybe even with the Warriors pick later in the first round. Now we go from that to another player. This player that I have here, actually, no, I'm going to save him for last. I believe there was one more. There was one more here. I need to find him. Well, while I find him, we'll talk about, I think, the highest upside for the Miami Heat if we were to go this route. Now, this player, like I mentioned, I think he has very good upside, very good potential. You see there, his pro comp is Jamal Murray or Jordan Poole. Now, similar players, very different impacts on winning, obviously. But basically, what I got from even just reading those two names when I was reading his draft report, he's a 3-level scorer. My boy Jeremiah Fears can put the ball in the hole. He knows how to do it. He has point guard creation ability. He's very clutch down the stretch. He had a very, very impressive late game execution in Alabama's SEC tournament game. I believe they lost that game, but he had, I believe, 2 buckets down the stretch, had a steal, had an assist, had another steal. He was everywhere, so I think that's a very good sign for him. His driving ability, being crafty, getting downhill. His jumper is not a question mark, but it's like a concern. I don't think people are necessarily like scared of him because of his inconsistent jumper, but I think they are, again, mindful of it. We're like, hey, there are some nights where he's on and there are some nights where he can't throw a rock into the ocean. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So that's where I'm not going to call it a question mark. I'm just going to call it a concern. His main questions are his shot selection, which is where the Jordan Poole kind of comes into the decision making, again, similar, and strength. As you can tell from that picture, I know it's not the best picture with his body, but you can see he's not very strong. Defensively, he's going to get picked on. I know what you guys are probably thinking. We already have a Tyler Hero, so why would we pair him with Hero? And I get that. And I would even say we have a Terry Rozier, and that didn't work out very well. But again, there is a world where you hit the reset button. And I think Jeremiah Fears is the reset button mark. Or if the Heat were to draft him, I think that is them saying like, hey, we're open to trading a Tyler Hero for some assets. We're open to trading a Bam Adebayo for some assets. I'm not saying we're there yet. That's DEFCON 5. Panic meter is completely broken off of the system. Like, I don't think we're going to get there. But I do think I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you guys about Jeremiah Fears and what he potentially could be, as he is someone that has been rumored around the areas where the Heat could get. Because, again, he could fall due to his decision-making and the fact that you look at these other teams, the Utahs of the world, the Charlottes of the world, they already have a guard, or maybe don't necessarily need that guard, because why would we do that up in the draft when you have a Cooper Flag, a BJ Edgecombe, an Ace Bailey, and in the middle of the pack, like I mentioned, you have teams who already have guard play, so there's no need for him, like a Toronto. They're not going to pick up him over to pick him with Scotty. I mean, there's a world where they do it, but I don't think they would necessarily think about that off rip. So I think that he could get him later in the draft. And again, in that 13, 14, 15, 16 range, it's about taking a risk on potential, because at that point, these players, there's a reason they're that far down. So I think Jeremiah Fears is someone to keep an eye on in the draft. Even if the Heat don't get him, I think he's someone that to keep an eye on moving forward for sure. Now, the other person that I was going to talk about that I did not add a graphic for, unfortunately, is Jace Richardson. Yes, Jason Richardson's son. Basically, I'm not saying his comp is Jalen Brunson, but he has Jalen Brunson tendencies where he's able to get downhill. He's an undersized guard, a lefty. He's able to get into the defense, get into the paint with his footwork, with his kind of like small guard footwork like Jalen Brunson has. And he's a 15-point per game scorer. He, in his last like 11 games, he's been putting up ridiculous numbers effectively, but his downside or question mark, funny enough, his athleticism. He's not the most athletic. He's not the tallest. Yes, I find the irony, and even the report said it, when you talk about a former dunk champion's son not being athletic, but that is the truth of the matter. The other thing I will note about Richardson, he did go to Columbus High here in Miami. He is a homegrown talent. we're suckers for that. So I do think, and I mean that like in a good way. Like we like that. We like the Udonis Haslem stories of the world. So there is a world where I think if we get it later in the draft and some of these other players are gone, I think that we could pick up Richardson on that aspect of like, hey, we love it. You've been here before. You understand Heat culture. You understand the NBA system, the NBA life. I think we're gonna take a flyer on you, and it could pay off in the end. Again, a lot of guards in this draft, so that's why I'm like, there is a world where some of these guards are on the team. Again, Terry Rozier, I feel like, is out of here. I think he's gonna be the one that he try to trade the most aggressively. There is a world. I think we love Davion Mitchell. He's not going anywhere. Tyler's not going anywhere as of right now. Again, he would be the hit. If the hit the reset button, he would have to be the first one to go, or be probably the one you get the most out of. And I don't think he's necessarily untouchable. I'm being honest with you guys. I don't think he's necessarily untouchable, but there is a world where he gets traded for. And if you do that, you can hit the reset button with a Richardson, with a Fears. Me personally, I think the first two that we talked about, Kasparis and Fleming, I think that's more realistic for the Heat to pick up this year. Players that can contribute to winning may need some time to get going, but in the short term can be on the roster, can be getting possible minutes. I'm a Kasparis guy. I think he would be perfect for the Heat. But the Fleming side of it is understandable because you do need a little bit more help at that forward spot, at that post player position. And he's similar to Khalil Ware, again, athletic, more of a perimeter post than Khalil Ware is. So I think you can even play them together, which would be a great thing. You can have kind of like a rotation between the two of them and Bam. I think that'd be perfect. You don't have to worry about Kevin Love that much anymore. He'd be more of a, obviously a veteran for the two of them along with Bam, but kind of someone that you get spot minutes. You can just get in there, spread the floor, maybe give them a breather. So those are the two guys. Again, I'm more of a Kasparis guy personally, but I understand if you're a Fleming guy. Comment down below though, do you think the Heat should tank this year? And if we do tank, are one of these four guys the ones you guys want on the team? A Kasparis, a Fleming, a Fears, a Richardson, or is there somebody else in the draft that you want to do? And tell me which of those four you like and why. Let me know down in the comments below. Again, let me know, should the Heat tank? And who would you pick out of the four that I mentioned here, or somebody else in the draft? But with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next episode of Heat Digest.